Hey, it's Jessica Goose here with RealAgriculture.com, and joining me right now is Kajal Devani, who's a Director of Science and Technology at the Canadian Angus Association. Kajal, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, we are here to talk about something very cool, and I don't know why it's just getting me so excited, but this is some really neat research that you have done, and it's all in regards to kind of using genomic technology within the beef industry, and obviously with you working for the Canadian Angus Association with the Angus herd. So kind of explain to me or give me an overview of what your research has found.
Sure. So at the Angus Association, we collect data, pedigree and performance information on all seed stock animals that are registered with our association. And the point of that is to turn that data into something usable by the producer. And we do that in a form of EPD, or estimated breeding value. It kind of gives you a measurement of how well an animal will do in terms of being a parent for the future generation to contribute towards the industry. So that's my job, and my research is to evolve those tools or advance those tools. So recently we've done that by adding tools for new traits, so feet and leg structure, which really impacts cow longevity in terms of their ability to move, feed themselves, stay in a herd, and stay productive. It impacts animal health and welfare and consumer trust. Same with teat and udder structure, and our newest project, which is described in the poster behind me, high immune response. Mm-hmm. So EPDs for all these traits give our producers a way to identify animals that have superior genetic potential for these traits, and then use them for progeny, basically to develop further generations and improve those traits. And we think it's a fantastic way to add value to Canadian Angus genetics and what we do at the Breed Association.
For sure. And I would say this was almost kind of revolutionary in the fact that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, nothing like this, I would say, existed for how in-depth this is. Is this kind of the way that you would say breeding is kind of heading?
Yeah, for sure. So, we had EPDs before, about 30 years ago, but they were for really easy to measure traits like birth weight and yearling weight. So we addressed the growth potential and production potential in our herds, but genomic technology and the advances in genomic technology in the last 10 years has meant that we can describe traits that are much more difficult to describe, much more difficult to measure, more expensive to measure. Maybe they're measured later on in life. And so we use genomic technology to help us describe these, the genetic potential or breeding values for these traits in a more accurate way. So, we collect pedigree information and phenotype information. Now we also collect genomic information to include into our genetic evaluations. And it makes a big difference to the kind of traits that we can describe for producers. For example, feed costs producers about 70% of their operation costs, and if we can describe to them or help them identify animals that have the genetic potential to grow the same amount but for less amount of feed, then we're improving our efficiencies, and that makes a big difference to the producer's profitability, but it also makes a difference to the industry's impact on environment and our footprint on the environment, efficiencies, greenhouse gases. It's really good for consumer trust when we can address these issues through genetic selection rather than adding antimicrobials, for example, or any other management type intervention. So for us, genomic technology and the advances we've seen are all a good news story.
No kidding. Yeah. And like you said, it's kind of in the past 10 years that it has really evolved. And, yeah. And like you mentioned there, and I think one thing that will for sure stand out for producers here is that it will, help in the long term with their bottom line, which is a big thing, yeah. Especially like you said there with 70% of the cost for feed, right? So speaking of producers, one thing that they may or may not know is that they, not that they have a voice, they know that they have a voice, but with the Canadian Angus Association, they can contact you if they're wanting something, right? Or if
Absolutely.
They're looking for some sort of tool. Explain to me all about that.
Yeah, so the Canadian Angus Association is member-owned. So we want to always have our doors open and invite producers, whether they're seed stock producers or commercial producers, as long as they're using Angus genetics, we want them to work for them. So we want producers to always be able to call us and say, hey, Director of Science and Technology, here's a technology, here's a tool that I think would be really valuable to me and maybe other producers around me, please develop. And we have great working relationships with funding bodies like BCRC, AAFC, to help us then identify, okay, this is a priority for producers. We can design a research and development study. We have the support, the financial support of institutions like that. And we work with UCVM at the Calgary University. We work with University of Guelph. They have a really great team there. For example, they're part of our immunology project. We work with the University of Alberta. So we can gather the expertise and the support that's needed, and we can develop these tools because that's what we exist for, is to add value to the Canadian Angus genetics.
Yeah. It's kind of like in a previous interview that I did with the Canadian Agriculture Human Resources Council. They're developing stuff with farmers for farmers, right? And that sounds exactly like this program, right? If you have that farmer and rancher that has this tool in mind, or has, hey, why don't you do some research on this? I think that's awesome that they can contact you. And for those that are listening or watching this video, I will be sure to link the Canadian Angus Association's website to our website at realagriculture.com. Thank you so much for your time, Kajal. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. Thanks, Jessica.